One of the biggest factors that can help determine whether or not your portrait painting is compelling or not comes down to the design of your portrait painting. What is the composition like? How are the overall shapes constructed in the image? A painting with a strong design, a strong composition, will grab someone's eye from across the room and draw them in. But how do we build our eye for composition? How do we learn to see in terms of these larger abstract shapes and relationships? To do this, we'll use one of my favorite exercises, the notan, to study a portrait and its composition. But before I get into it, if you want to learn the practices and exercises that will help you regularly build your skills and make good progress to improve your paintings, then be sure to check out my online course, Starting a Sketchbook Practice. In this course, I help you establish a regular sketching practice that will help you continue to build your skills, and I give you specific sketchbook exercises you can do to target different skills you want to build. So if you've been meaning to start a sketchbook practice but you're not sure how to get started, then this class is just for you. Check it out at the link, and I hope to see you there. Okay, now let's get to the exercise. For this exercise, you'll want a good portrait reference image with strong lighting. So here's the one I'll be using. This is from a website that provides free images, and I'll link to that below, but you can also use your own photograph as well. So this is the image we'll be using. I have it printed on paper, and then you'll also want a small sketchbook. So here I have this pocket-sized sketchbook that I'll be using, and then you'll want both a pencil, any sort of simple pencil will do, and also some sort of dark marker. So to start this sketch, I draw a border on my sketchbook page that matches the size of my printout of the reference image, and this will just be helpful in going back and forth between looking at the reference and trying to get things accurate on my sketch. Then I lightly start to sketch the overall shape of the head and the neck. So here I'm just eyeballing it. If you want, you can use a grid, or even if you want, you can trace it to try to get the proportions right. I'm not too concerned about getting everything exactly right. This is not so much a drawing exercise, but more a focus on the shape and design of the overall image. So if some things are a little bit off, I'm not going to be too concerned about it. I'm just looking back and forth between the reference and the drawing and trying to get things to be about right. So the goal is to get the overall placement and relationships and the proportion of the major shapes. But if you want to spend more time on this stage, you can, just continuing to refine the drawing so that it is more accurate. Once I have the main shape of the head and neck defined, then I add some basic guidelines. So I sketch a line that is kind of going down where the center of the face is, like where the nose and the lips line up, and also sketching a line for where the eyes line up. These are just helpful guidelines for when I'm adding more detail to the shapes of the face. Now that I have this basic structure sketched out, then this is where the notan study really begins. So the goal here is to take all of this full range of values and tones in the reference and simplify it to just black and white. Here's how the conversion looks in Photoshop, and I'm just showing this for illustrative purposes. You might look at it and think, oh, do I even need to do this exercise if I can just convert it on my computer? But trust me, you'll learn a lot from doing this exercise. While the computer can be helpful, I recommend doing the full exercise that I'm doing here. So what we're going to do is we're going to squint at the reference image, and then we're going to try to see where the light and dark shapes are. And that's what we're going to communicate with this study. So then I start in my sketch marking where I'm seeing the dark areas. For example, the hair looks really dark, so that's kind of its own dark shape. The eye sockets become these larger dark shapes, and the shadow cast by the nose and that whole shadow side of the face pretty much becomes its own dark shape. There is a little bit of patch of light in the shadow side of the face, so I'll mark that as like a lighter shape. But these are the shapes that I'm starting to define and consider. As I'm separating things into light and shadow shapes, I'm not worried about capturing every little detail. This is a really small sketch, and I'm trying to focus on the larger shapes rather than all of the small features. For example, I don't draw every detail in the eye that's getting hit by the light. Instead, I just squint and I focus on the overall shape of the eye socket. Also, same thing goes with the other features like the nose and the lips.
And this helps me think in terms of the overall shape, the overall composition, the overall design of the painting, rather than the individual lines or textures. And this is important because when we look at a painting, especially if you look at a painting from far across a room, you're not going to see these small details in the features first. What you see first is these overall shapes, that overall effect of the painting from far away. And so that's really what we're trying to study here. And although this reference does have really strong lighting, I still have to make some decisions as to where I'm putting the cutoffs for the light and dark shapes. So don't be surprised if you're working on this exercise and you're not exactly sure what decisions to make or where, say, a dark shape ends and a light shape begins. For example, on the parts of the face where it's turning from light to dark, there's not a clear line where it goes from light to dark, but instead it is a slight gradient. And so we as artists need to choose where we want that cutoff to be. And that simplification is part of the challenge and part of the lesson that we learn when we're doing these no-tan studies. So if you feel like you're uncertain as to where to make those cutoffs, just give it your best guess, give it a try, and then assess the drawing once you've finished it to see how you feel about it. You can even do multiple no-tans of the same image and choose different cutoffs for where you want to define those light and shadow areas and see how it impacts the overall design. Once I'm confident with the light and dark areas on the face, then I start to refine the lines that I've sketched in. So I go over them more with the pencil, make them a little bit darker, a little bit clearer. And I also take the background into consideration. So in this case, some parts of the background are light and some parts of the background are dark. And so I mark those areas, and those will also be included in my light and dark shapes. Now, here it's important to note that there will be some boundaries that are lost. For example, in areas where a dark shape in the background touches a dark area of the head, I'm going to remove the boundary between those two dark shapes. So those two shapes will essentially merge in my no-tan. But if it's light in the background and dark on the face, then that boundary would stay. And this is where the no-tan can become a little bit more abstract, and you might feel a little bit lost if you're losing, say, the boundary between the head and the background. You might think that, well, if we lose this information, then we might really lose important information for the picture. But I would argue that actually you might be surprised at how much information you can take away, and yet the image is still readable as a portrait. So in some ways, yes, the no-tan will be a little bit more abstract than you might be used to. This is totally okay. And this actually will help us see the composition better than if we have all of those additional lines. Next, I go in with my marker to trace over the lines I want to keep, and then I start filling in the dark areas with this marker. This stage really makes the design pop. You can also do it with a pencil, but I find using a marker it really brings out that contrast. And you can see now that the darks and lights are clearly defined and the overall composition becomes obvious. So you can see how simplifying everything into black and white really brings the overall design of the image to the forefront. The small distracting details are gone, and now we can really see the overall composition, the flow of shapes, how the light and dark shapes are balanced or not. All of this becomes really clear. And so when I'm looking at this, I'm trying to see, are the shapes here, are they interesting? Are they compelling? How do I feel when I look at the composition? And it's a lot easier to do this when I'm looking at this sort of simplified no-tan than when I'm looking at the reference image. So if you haven't done this before, or if you struggle with composition, I highly recommend to give this a try, see how it goes, and let me know how it went for you in the comments below.
Thanks again for watching. I hope you liked this video and gave the no-tan exercise a try yourself. And if you did like this video, if you found it valuable or helpful, then you can show your support by joining my Patreon. I don't have any big sponsors for this video, and my channel is supported by people just like you. So if you want to help keep the channel going and support my work, then check out my Patreon at the link. My Patreon also includes exclusive Patreon-only perks. So if you wanted to see reference photos for my paintings, if you want to participate in a Q&A session, or if you want to see real-time, full-length painting videos and follow my process step by step, then be sure to check it out. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.